Hey guys, welcome to my channel. If this is your first time here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content like this. So not too long ago I posted on my Instagram page a photo that says 2 things that guitar tabs can't give you. And this photo got a lot of hate, primarily from electric guitar players who can't read sheet music and then felt the need possibly to justify why they use things like tabs or other ways to learn music. So first off, I have no problem with guitar tabs. I use guitar tabs all the time, especially as a teacher. I think guitar tabs are a great way for beginning students to learn how to play songs quickly. Even as a player myself, if I want to relearn a song that I used to play by one of my favorite bands, I'm going to go to guitar tabs long before I go check out the sheet music for it. It just wouldn't really make sense. But even though I appreciate and use guitar tabs, that doesn't mean that I don't know the limitations and know when to use them and when not to use them. So when people complain about guitar tabs, one of the first things that comes to mind is the lack of rhythm. But as many of you guys know, that guitar tabs nowadays oftentimes can include the rhythm, and if you know how to read music rhythmic notation fairly well, oftentimes these tabs are actually pretty useful. So then in my post I wasn't talking about the lack of rhythm, but what I was talking about was the lack of what we call melodic and harmonic intent. So what's melodic intent? As many of you may know, the guitar is what we call a polyphonic instrument, meaning it can play a melody and accompaniment or bass line pattern at the exact same time. But if you're playing all of these different parts on the guitar, how do you know which one is the melody and which one's the bass? Sure, sometimes it can be very easy, the low notes are the bass line and the high notes are the melody, but what if they're all more or less in the same register? Then what? So in standard guitar notation, this is shown by the direction of the stems, with the notes that are intended to be the melody pointing up and the notes that are intended to be the bass or accompaniment parts pointing down. Now for anyone that plays a monophonic instrument where you can only do one note at a time, this might seem really weird since it breaks the rules of stemming. But in guitar notation it makes it a lot easier to understand what the writer's intent is when it comes to what part is doing what. So here's a piece of music written out where all the stems are facing the exact same direction. And if I were to ask you what part is the melody and what part is the accompaniment, you might be able to guess, but how do you know what the composer was really thinking? You don't. Now here's the same piece of music written in 3 different ways, each of them implying a different melody and bass line. The first example would sound like this. The second example would sound like this. And the third example would sound like this. Although the notes and the rhythms are the same in all of these, what part is being brought out a little bit more or a little bit less is determined by what part is the intended melody. So the other part of my post is something that we call harmonic intent, which has to do with the intention of the harmony that is given. So if you know some basic music theory, you would see the note C, E, G and know that that is a C major chord. And if we had a C, E, G, B, that would be a C major 7 chord. However, if you're only told where to play the note, but not what note you're playing, how do you know that the composer didn't want you to play an F flat as opposed to an E? They would sound exactly the same, but their name would be different. But now you're probably asking, well, why does that matter? So let's go back to the C major 7 chord. So C, E, G, B, as I said before, would be a C major 7. But how do you know that E isn't functioning as an F flat and the G is functioning as an A double flat and the B is functioning as a C flat? F flat, A double flat, C flat now would become an F flat minor chord, which already is way different than a C major 7 chord. Depending on how one perceives the chord will then alter the way that they understand the function of the chord. Think of the function as the job that that chord has in that particular key. So a C major 7 chord is going to have a completely different function than an F flat minor chord does. Depending on the function that the chord has, someone might play the chord with a little bit more attention, depending on the chord that follows it. But in order to decide this, you need to know what the intended harmony is by the composer. So one of the big arguments that people have been using of why guitar tab is totally okay to use is because, well, why not just go listen to the recording and figure it out yourself? And yeah, that's great, you can totally do that. But at the same time, what if the piece has never been recorded before? Then what? There's been tons of times where I've played in premieres and it's never been recorded before. Then what do I do? So all in all, are guitar tabs useful? Yeah, I think so. Are they the best for everything? Definitely not. Can they work very well for some things? Yeah, definitely. My recommendation for any guitar player is to understand guitar tabs really well and to understand sheet music really well, so that way you can use one or the other depending on the situation that you need them for. However, if after watching this you totally disagree with me, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks.